Welcome back everyone to my 1022 Zero to Hero build. This is where I take a $300 1022 and turn it into a competition hero with no expense spared. We've done some upgrades in parts 1 through 5. We started with an SBI 1022 chassis here. We also added a Vortex Strike Eagle scope and scope rings. We also did some accessories with the Sky Pod from MDT and Armageddon Gear bag. We've also done a kid trigger, single stage, and the XLR C6 buttstock. And today I'm happy to announce that we're doing our upper receiver rebuild. So not so much a rebuild as a complete transplant because we have all new parts here. Starting with the receiver itself, we have the Dlask Arms TUF-22. It's made from 7075 T6 aluminum. Pretty happy to be putting this in here. Up next, we have the Kid Innovative Design bolt. So this is bolt and firing pin in here that we're going to be putting in. We also have the Dlask Arms spring kit and extended charging handle. So that should be good. Last but not least, a Kid buffer. So starting here with the receiver, guide rod, charging handle, you can see that the white spring is for subsonic, orange would be your hyper, those are things like velocitors and stingers, and you have your standard high velocity spring with no color at all. So we're going to be choosing our white spring here. You can see the, might be hard to see on camera, the tip is actually painted white. There's the orange, looks almost like a rust, it's not, and just the standard spring. Okay, so for those who haven't taken apart their 1022 or haven't cleaned it, I'll show you how to put it back together once you have it apart. So you'll notice the guide rod is pointed, and down in here, it's going to be really hard to see on camera, there's a little slot kind of for that pointed end. So that pointed end is actually going to come through like this, and that's where it's going to sit. But before that, we need to put our spring on. So this is easier when it's out of the receiver. Take your spring. You don't really have to compress it down just yet. You come in that way, and then we get our charging handle, and this longer flat side is going to be down because that's going to fit in the groove here. So now we kind of need to compress our spring. Get this in there. And it's going to sit like that. So once that's in there, you need to take your bolt and you're actually just going to drop it in there. So you want the extractor side to be facing the extraction port, and just kind of slips in here. You almost need to have it straight up and down to get it in easily. Otherwise it goes lopsided like that and then it won't fit in. So a little bit of wiggling. A little bit of wiggling, it slides in like that. So once that's in like that, we need to get the charging handle into that little slot there. To do that, we need to move this back. So you need to use your thumb to gain some leverage, because the spring is on an angle here. If you just try and push, you're almost going to pull this spring out. So use your thumb, get leverage, and while pushing the bolt all the way to the back of the receiver, you need to pull it up like this. So you can give yourself some clearance to get the charging handle underneath, like that. Once you get it into this kind of position here, where you can see it's down in the groove it needs to be, you can just give it a little push on this side of the bolt and it'll spring forward. Now we need to get our buffer in. My kid buffer here actually has a hole in it for this metal rod to add some rigidity, but it also helps with the install. A lot of buffers you see are just completely solid and just plastic like that, but we're gonna actually be able to get this in first by pushing it all the way through and then push this in afterwards. We can kind of just twist and push this in like so. Try and line it up. And there we go. With it through, we can just kind of push our pin in here. Okay, now that that's ready to go, we need to get that into the gun. First thing I have to do is get this chassis off and scope. Okay, now that we're out of the chassis, remember here that there's this pin that goes through the trigger group, and it has little tiny Allen keys. We got to take that out. The back pin on the trigger group is actually threaded with these, and these are on the outside of the chassis. Now that those pins are out here, you can just pull this trigger right out. And if you remember from the trigger video, I had to add this little chamfer here to get the screws in, and we're gonna have to do the same on the new receiver because it just comes flat. Okay, that took much longer than the last time. You can see I got that little chamfered edge, and the screws now fit down inside flush. Do a little dry fire test and some functionality here. Let's test the safety. Yep. Good to go. And the bolt hold open. And release. Yep. Everything looks good. At this point, I would love to just continue on, leave this barrel in here, and call it a day and put the new barrel into the new receiver. But in the end, I do want to test to make sure that each part by themselves can add some accuracy. If not, that's kind of the goal of all of this. So unfortunately, we need to take this barrel and put it on this receiver, which is a little bit blasphemous. Okay, now that we got the barrel out of the other receiver and the V-block off, going to put it on the new one.
2 hours later.
Okay, so after much hammering and a lot of swearing and trying to get this barrel to fit, it's just not going to happen. It's like, it has this interesting thread on the end. I don't know if that's a stock 1022 barrel thing, but essentially you have to just twist it all the way on, but I don't want to destroy the receiver. So we're now going to accelerate the build a little bit and use the new IBI barrel. Get that in there. Even if I were to get the stock barrel back on, I am worried about getting it off. It's just way too tight. So yeah, I'm gonna try and get this on, and I'll be back in a sec. Well, everyone, there it is. All on. It was much easier to get this IBI barrel in over the stock. You can see in here, the extractor feeds in. And now it's time to put it back together. Here it is back in the chassis. And it's time to get the scope back on. Scope's back on. Gonna have to re-zero it at the range, but it's looking great. Okay, I'll see you guys out of the range and we'll get some groups here. Okay guys, I'm back from the range. Sorry I couldn't film. It was low light, there wasn't a lot of time, and there was a bunch of people there, so. But anyway, I took some initial groups. I just took 4 types of ammo out. So up here, we have CCI standard. These are actually worse than the previous iteration of this build by about 20%, I think, 20% worse, which actually isn't that surprising. It was pretty windy, it was snowy, it was cold, and I could actually feel the wind gusting, especially on this group. Here in the middle, these 2 groups are actually Lapua Center X. I put these into Ballistic X, and it was about 15% better than the previous build. Down here at the bottom, we have some SK Flat Nose, and these ones are about 30 to 40% better, I believe, when I put them into Ballistic X than the previous build. And over on the right, this group here and down here, these are SK Biathlon Sport. I think these are about a 60 or 70% improvement in group size, which is pretty good because I have a lot of this stuff. I'm still waiting on my thread protector here at the end of the barrel. Seems crazy to me that International Barrels doesn't include one when they ship. So I'm having to be pretty careful with that. But thank you for watching. In the next day or two, I'm actually going to be taking out 16 different types of subsonic 22, and we're going to get some real groups on this. Have a good one.